Patrick Harrison Price from the Historic Wall Center, and we welcome in Patrick Johnston of the Province and Post Media, who covers the Vancouver Canucks and hockey. And Patrick, just start with your thoughts and memories of Johnny Gaudreau after we lose him and his brother Matthew in a horrible accident.
Well, just a player who always lit up the ice. You know, the guy who stepped in the ice, he touched the puck, and you knew something was going to happen. And you could understand why the Flames were so high on this guy right from the start, even if he was this small player. A player who changed, I think rightly changed the perception of what was possible from smaller players, continued a legacy of guys like Marty St. Louis, and especially in this modern game, it doesn't matter what size you are, that the skill is what matters. And if you can play fast, you're going to make it. And he did it. That's all I know. I mean, I just knew the player. I didn't know him otherwise. Obviously saw, the notes from everybody at like Eddie Lack, who described him as his favorite teammate ever. The whole story, obviously, just everything about it. Drunk driving, impatient driving, not an accident. There were some choices here. It's just tragic. A person out trying to do what they want to do, enjoying the road as they should be able to. And obviously the element of his sister's wedding and Johnny being a young father and everything, and his brother and his brothers, it's just devastating. Absolutely every element. No one's death is ever easy to take, but the extra bits in this story just feel like a pile on. And
it was,
yeah. It's just it's too much to take, really.
Mentioned in the opening block, Patrick, but one of the things that I'll remember Johnny Gaudreau for is, we thought the small player might be on the way out. Right. And then along came this kid, a fourth round pick, who was putting up these extraordinary seasons with Boston College. And he was from the Jersey Shore, which was unique, right? Like, not a lot of hockey players come from the Jersey Shore. And how's he going to do it in the NHL at 5'9" and 160 pounds soaking wet? And then he bursts onto the scene and he puts 24 goals up in his first full NHL season. Yeah. And I think probably did give a lot of the, smaller, undersized, shorter, underweight players hope and belief that they could be NHL players as well.
And, drove the Flames to a first-round series victory against the Canucks that year.
That's right.
Absolutely. That the skill is what matters. And I suppose a preview of where the game was going. And look where we are now. And a guy that continued to thrive. And, made an unusual choice to go join Columbus, but a player who they wanted to build their future around. And I guess the other thing that stood out to me was a guy who always showed up. I guess there was I think somebody raised or retweeted. I think I still look at Twitter from time to time, but retweeted a stat. I guess all-time leading scorer in the World Championships for the USA. Now, I mean, USA in the World Championships. USA hockey in the World Championships has been a strange story over the years, but a guy, I guess, who always showed up. He loved playing, he loved where he was from, obviously proud American. Those are not rare, but a guy who was proud to play for whatever team he was involved with. And, we saw the departure from Calgary, and, I think that was an emotional choice for him, but a choice he made, and a player who clearly played with passion and the outpouring of grief that is no accident. Like, this was a guy that was loved by everybody, and I think quite clearly loved everyone,
and a superstar too. I mean, we've seen some great seasons by Canucks in recent years. 115 points in his contract year there with the Flames,
40 goals.
I mean, we know how difficult it has been for Miller and Pettersson to actually get to triple digits. He passed it with flying colors at 115 points. I mean, that's an unbelievable year.
75 assists. 40 goals. I mean, that was an astounding season for that Flames team. And he, that you think about that line with him and Tkachuk and Elias Lindholm and how powerful that line was. And it was obviously we saw a lot of the Flames that year. and that was a Flames team that was close to something, and he was the core of that, I think. I mean, Matthew Tkachuk, obviously the rambunctious play and the power forward element, but to me, it was always Gaudreau that was the guy that was going to go make it happen. If they needed a goal, they needed to find a way to win. It was going to be led by him.
You talk about him always showing up. Brian Burke, in his statement, of course, former Flames executive, said Johnny was the first guy to raise his hand anytime there was any kind of community or charitable work opportunities. The other thing, because of course, when you talk about the small player in the NHL, people wonder, can they be durable? 6 times he played 80 games.
Yeah.
9 times he played 70 plus games, and he played all but 1 game in the pandemic shortened season as well. So not quite an Iron Man, because there's a sprinkle of games missed in there. But year after year, he was there and available for selection. And putting his best foot forward.
I mean, you look at a couple guys on the Canucks, Connor Garland, Quinn Hughes. I mean, both of them will tell you that you learning to survive against big players is a skill, and Gaudreau clearly was the best at that. I like I said, always showed up ready to go. Obviously, I mean, these guys play through stuff, and obviously play through all kinds of stuff as well. It's just everything you want in a hockey player.
And by the way, finishing the World Championship point, 43 points, edging Patrick Kane at 42 points. Kane's got him a point per game, but further to the point, Johnny Gaudreau showed up. He played 40 games for the U.S. at the World Championship to 25 for Patrick Kane.
And the Worlds has never been a necessarily popular thing for American hockey players for whatever reason, but he wanted to do it, and he always answered the call and always went.
A tough turn here, Patrick, but there is Canucks news. We all cover the Vancouver Canucks, yourself included, and you were busy writing about Arturs Silovs yesterday and his exclusion from the Latvian Olympic qualifying team. For those who missed the story, lay out what you've reported and what you understand about this matter.
A strange one to follow, because it's August. We're all sort of half paying attention. Obviously, I don't know how many of us are regularly reading Latvian hockey accounts, but Wednesday afternoon pops up. People start noticing that Silovs has not yet just not played in the 2 warm-up games for Latvia, but isn't even on their preliminary roster for this weekend's Olympic qualifying tournament in Riga. So at home, a huge event, big tournament for them. And, a guy who is expected to play a key role, and he has not appeared at all, although he has been in camp. And you start digging around, and you find a couple of reports from the main place I looked was a Latvian sports site called Sports Centers, and ended up connecting with a couple of reporters there. And after, I guess, Monday night, I think, the report basically that reporters asked, well, where the heck's Silovs? And they're like, well, he's been watching the games, because they played a couple other guys, dealing with something. We think he'll be ready to play, but he's dealing with something, and we don't want it to turn into a chronic problem. You start going, what? And it doesn't appear on the roster on Wednesday. Now, my initial thought, everyone was, oh my God. And I'm like, okay, well, what's going on here? And you're trying to kind of parse the information. Nobody's saying anything. But the key element here was to wait, because if you go read the AAHF roster rules in general for tournaments, you have until 2 hours before the first game to declare your full roster. So they had until essentially 8 a.m. Pacific. Their game on Thursday was at 10 a.m. against Slovenia. And they had until 8 a.m. Pacific to add a third goalie, which they surely were going to do. And, I checked at 7:30, and I was probably minutes after they submitted their final roster, and there was no Silovs. And around the same time, we start seeing an announcement coming out from the Latvian Hockey Federation that he's dealing with knee inflammation, whatever that means. I to a degree where I guess there was, clearly there's a discussion based on the release from the Lions, but a discussion between the Canucks and the Latvians, basically saying, well, what do you think? What's best for him? And the decision was made that he shouldn't play. and so he's out. I guess the suggestion is he should be fine. I mean, the Latvian statement said, there's maybe some concern about starting the season, and so you're like, okay, well, for what? What do you mean? I mean, it left a lot ambiguous. Obviously, I checked with the Latvian reporters. I checked with the Latvian reporters, and they said, yeah, that's essentially, the Google Translate gave a reasonable.
But still, there's a dissembly here, Patrick.
Yeah.
Like knee ligament inflammation. Laffy initially says he's going to be ready for the start of the season. The GM tells Dhaliwal it's a minor injury, should be ready for Penticton.
Yeah.
The coach said he's ready to start the tournament.
Yeah.
And then announced before saying he's overworked, and the medical staff determined that the danger limit of turning the situation to a chronic injury is high. We decided to protect him a little. So it's hard to know what to know.
And the Canucks aren't saying much. I did ask them if they wanted to add anything, and they said no. And
which is weird. I mean, weird. Like, why wouldn't you add to that?
I mean, they haven't. They've kept mum on all of this stuff. So that's in keeping with that. But
with the Demko thing, there's no other. There's no other party involved. There's another party involved here that has said he's injured.
To me, and which I suppose is that, well, look what everyone has said. To me, it's you now have your fans in a lather. Why not just say he's fine? He just needs a little rest. We'll see him on the 19th.
It's free to say that. There's no cost.
I mean, the only thing I can think of is maybe Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin thinks it hurts them leverage-wise in either trade negotiations or in contract negotiations with Kevin Lankinen or another free agent goaltender if they come out and specify and talk about the extent of these injuries or setbacks or whatever you want to call them and how long the goaltenders in question might need to recover.
In public, I suppose. But, I mean, in the end, every agent of all those goalies who are sitting there thinking, well, there's a possible opportunity here. They now can see what's going on. Like that, they'll see something, whatever the Canucks say. I mean, I think for me, it's just simply about talking to your fans. Like we're aware. Yes, he's been working hard this summer. It's happened sometimes. He needs to take a break.
Yeah. We were talking about the Demko story, and my opinion was pragmatism when it comes to fortifying the position,
right?
Because exactly how injured Demko is still remains a matter of debate, and when he comes back remains a matter of debate. So I thought, again, be pragmatic about, be cautious. No need to jump and pounce. With this news, does this change the equation? Do you need another body at this point?
Well, I mean. Assuming he's okay to go, in theory, you still have 4 goalies for camp. I haven't mentioned Ty Young. Ty Young will be there. But that said, it's a bit like understanding how you put together a pro camp, right? Derek Popke and I had, he's helped Troy Stetcher put together his pro camp the last couple of years. And Derek has always highlighted to me that one of the ways you attract players is you have NHL goalies, because they want to be able to prepare against the kinds of goalies that they actually face. And so, having a Ty Young, respect to Ty Young, but having a guy who is a junior goalie and has, will probably be playing in junior this year. In the end, that is not how you're going to prepare, nor is having, respect to Jonathan Lemieux, who did have I suppose, solid season in the ECHL last year, but he is the 3rd string goalie for the Abbotsford Canucks. And those are going to be 2 of your goalies right now. Like you've got, if Silovs isn't able to go, because you've got Tolopilo and Patera, they have bodies, they have guys, but in the end, even if you're, having to, and they only have 6 preseason games, but you still have to dress rosters and there's that element of just putting teams on the ice. And then there is the start of the season and how long until Demko's ready to go. And, the ability to actually go. I mean, if they can get right now, the task is get through training camp, because they know there's going to be, if worse comes to worse, there will be a goalie on waivers, right? But if Silovs really is dealing with something that means he cannot be a full participant, and as we've said, everything that has been said, says he will be a full participant, but there is that what if element in the back of your mind. What are you going to do? Are you really just going to call a guy up on Saturday afternoon and say, can you come to Penticton for Sunday? That there's a lot of moving parts here. The PTO element, I mean, we know they've been making calls about that, because I think that's an admission that as we all have heard, that Denver Demko is not going to be there, at least not to start. So you do need another NHL quality goalie, because right now they only have two. Maybe Nikita Tolopilo. I mean, he's close, but he also is not a guarantee to be an NHL quality goalie. Like, he had a good season in the AHL, but again, there's a huge step. So they need more guys. Like that is clear.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll see how this shapes out. I mean, they may try to just walk the tightrope and get through early stages here, and but until we have more information, I mean, this is what I wrote last week. Like, inevitably there is a void. The Demko void, the void of information, means everyone's going to be going, oh boy, and that's going to be all we're going to be discussing probably until we get any more clarity. And and if there's no more clarity until we get to training camp, we're just going to keep talking about it, because they don't have a lot of goalies right now.
I mean, by the time main camp, from the time of this injury that clearly flared up days ago, we're not talking about, the clock doesn't start today. The clock starts a handful of days ago. It'll be a full month between presumably the last time Silovs was on the ice to the first day of camp. With the proper rest and rehabilitation, if it's minor inflammation, if it's tendonitis, I mean, that's enough time. Players do come back from that.
Yeah, listen, from what they basically said, he's overworked. He's worked. I mean, the implication, I think, was that he worked too hard. He went too hard, too fast, which happens. And you play a demanding position in goal.
And he was probably excited about this tournament.
Sure. Yeah, that's the thing. He I think the coach said at one point he'd been on the ice since June, beginning in June 12th, which is, pretty standard play there. I mean, give or take. I can't remember what was the last day of the conference final. That's 3 weeks, something like that, 4 weeks. So he'd been off for a bit, but he's been back on. Like it is going to be a shorter summer as a result. And rest is important. And he had a big, long, intense season in the end. So listen, it could be a simple thing. It could not be a big deal. It was initially sounded like a bit of a load management story, but now it's like, well, no, we need to be careful. He's got a big season in front of him. And of course, there's the Demko aspect of all this, which is that we don't know when he's going to be ready. So the weight is on Silovs. They need him to be as healthy as possible, which means the whole discussion is that much more frantic.
Yeah, it is. Look into your crystal ball for me. How many goaltenders are the Canucks going to use this season? What do you think? Upwards of three?
Three generally. I mean, the number of seasons across the league where teams use only two guys, and of course, those seasons are very rare. So you're not crazy to say three. The rate of teams using four goalies, I mean, that is not uncommon either.
Nope. Canucks have done it a bunch in the years gone by.
And that's it, that is reality. That's not, oh my God, they're overworking their goalies. That's just how it goes, right? Like, that's true for everybody. And it is a little bit that broader story of, look what happens, look what can happen. I mean, we forget part of the Casey DeSmith story, right? Like, Casey Smith comes in, but he had done this before, right? Like, had to step in and be an emergency guy in Pittsburgh, and pick up the slack where you could. And I wrote, I think, on the eve of the playoffs, or certainly, Arturs Silovs was in the mix, and he talked to me about knowing what Aiden Hill had done the year before for Vegas, a guy who had not been in the frame, that every team needs to be ready for whatever comes, and that sometimes they're just going to have to put a guy in, and it's on the guy to perform. The planning with your goalies is what there's a hope, but hope, of course, is not a plan. So you need to be ready. That's why you build everything in front of you. And that's why, I saw the Rick Talker video came out yesterday where he talks about, we need to work hard on our defense and think carefully. That's why you have to have, an organized defense, because in the end, you need to make it easy for whoever is standing in the net.
Last question. what can you tell went on here with Ian Clark and losing the director of goaltending title?
It's very odd. Like the timing, as I said at the time, was very odd. These are not changes you tend to announce in August. This is when you're having your meetings. And they had made a series of announcements. Remember they hired Yogi Sviatkovsky, right? Like earlier in the summer. They announced their coaching change earlier in the summer. So it was the timing on it underneath all this is still unclear. I think as we've gathered, there was a plan in place. I think Woodley was talking about this. Essentially he understood that there was a longer term shift in all this. Ian Clark is in his 60s now. This happens. Other teams are planning this out. Taking the title away is, with purpose. What else could it be, right? As far as I can tell, there's no reason not to have a director of goaltending, unless there has been something else that's been decided about how you want to manage your hockey operations. And the title was bestowed by the previous management group. So things, things change, and it is clear that Clark was looking to shift his role somewhat. Was he looking to change away from the full-on director title? I don't know. I don't expect he would.
Yeah, you don't suspect so. And as Woodley and others have mentioned, this probably leaves him poachable by other organizations after this season.
If they want to offer him that directorship.
Exactly.
Yeah. He's 58, by the way, not in his 60s.
Exactly. Don't age him.
Sorry to Ian. But no, I listened. Fine sign of it was a 5-year deal. Was that right? Like he was, or at least locked in as long as Demko's current deal. And Demko's got one more after this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, like change happens, but he's also under contract. So there was going to be a transition at some point. I think it just seems, as Woodley I think has said, this seems to have happened quicker than I think.
Yeah.
The worry is that we know that unlike a lot of goaltending coaches, Ian Clark actually adjusts goalies. A lot of goaltending coaches manage the style of that keeper that is already in place.
Right. That's right.
Ian Clark actually adjusts them. And if he's more hands off now,
does
that adjustment get looser? And do you see a step back?
Listen, everything I know of Marco Terenius, and I talked to him when he first arrived here, and I've heard from people. I mean, he is in the Ian Clark school of doing all this, right? He is in the Ian Clark disciple.
He's a disciple,
just as Curtis Sanford was, that there's a sort of that the overall result that you're going for. He is looking for the similarities, that this system worked. This is the system we are doing. And so you also are looking for goalies who can adapt to that system. You like look at the last couple of backup goalies we've had here. Look at Colin Delia, look at Casey DeSmith. Both of them came in not necessarily as obvious Ian Clark type goalies. Spencer Martin, although Spencer Martin chose to come here, but all three of them would tell you that they accepted that they were under this guy. They were going to have to take on stuff they had not done before.
That's it.
And they took it on.
And it's funny because Ian was not that guy early in his career. He was more a manage the personality, manage the style. That's the reason why they brought Rolly Melanson in, right?
Yeah.
To help Roberto change the style and be a better puck handler and all that.
Right.
Ian goes off, has extraordinary success, particularly in Columbus, becomes the goaltender whisperer. And I think it's fair to say that it's going to be relatively status quo for this year, with or without Ian on the ice, with or without him having the title, particularly since his disciple will be leading the on ice instruction. But beyond this year, Patrick, it's anybody's guess, right? You wonder if Rutherford who's an old goaltender himself, has names and people that, he would have otherwise brought with him had the goaltending coaching not been so settled and entrenched here when he arrived on the spot.
Which that, still, like that said, Terenius can point to his track record with SKA, right? Like he coached some big time goalies there, right? Like he coached when he was a young guy. Like he's been around he's been in the job. He has been a highly regarded goalie coach overseas for a long time. and he has coached some very good goalies in his past. So the big test is now on for him. Like this is everything.
This is the NHL test. Yeah. Like great that you did terrific work in the European professional ranks, and whether at the minor pro level, the H, but now it's now here's where the rubber meets the road for him.
And to your point, like Rutherford. I mean, in the end, this management team knows other goalie coaches, right?
That's right.
Like they're gonna he's got to show, whether it's up to him to sort of make the case that I'm the guy, and here we are.
Which is tough. Those are big goals for a goaltending coach.
Oh, yes. First-time guy, too, inheriting a finalist who has got a checkered injury history.
Yeah.
Have yourself a marvelous Labor Day weekend, and we will catch up next week, Patrick. Thank you.
All right, guys. Yes, happy Labor Day. Have a great time, everybody.